This week in the Pentagon, restoring hope, stories of survival.
I was sitting there like this with my thumb on the trigger, getting ready to pull the trigger. And the only thing that saved my life was I forgot to lock the head door.
You don't have to kill yourself. There's a way out.
And suffering in silence.
We want people to know that people do think about it, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to get help for it.
Plus, efforts to stop the stigma with seeking care.
I think that we are in a position to make a difference on stigma. And the way I like to say it is, we should never underestimate the impact of leadership.
Maybe if we just tried to be honest and share our story, that maybe we could give hope.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of This Week in the Pentagon. I'm Petty Officer Michael Wilkin. This week we continue our coverage of service members and suicide. It's our attempt to save lives and restore hope. As we've reported, suicides across the services have continued to climb. And so too have the number of suicide attempts and the people who live to tell their stories. One story of survival starts in Kandahar, Afghanistan, where one night a young Marine looked down the barrel of a gun, but was ultimately rescued by none other than Elmer Fudd.
I was sitting there like this with my thumb on the trigger, getting ready to pull the trigger.
It was about 2 a.m. Most of the VMT-204 was asleep when Sergeant Burton LaFleur picked up his gun and headed to the latrine.
I closed the door, inserted the magazine, put it on 3-round burst, and racked around.
LaFleur thought he knew the best way out. He knew with one pull his worries would be over. What he didn't know is that his squad leader was watching him.
My squad leader, he came out and literally ripped the door off the hinges when he heard me rack around. I consider it probably the luckiest I've ever been, was when he came in and ripped the rifle out of my mouth.
Lucky was not what he felt at the time. He looks back and describes a textbook case.
There was a girl I was chasing since high school. Well, in November of '03, she called me and said, "Hey, me and so-and-so are getting married. We'd like you to come to the wedding." So I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, that hurt. I ended up buying a '98 Mustang GT. I was paying right at $400 a month for my car. So I was feeling pretty let down, pretty alone in Kandahar. And those factors started influencing my work performance. I was falling asleep on post, so I was looking at administrative paperwork as well. I was getting counselings daily. I was looking at being NJP'd. So I mean, I had the relationship, the financial, and the professional issues all on top of me. I decided that the easiest answer was suicide.
LaFleur's weapon was confiscated. He was sent to the chaplain and to the base psychiatrist.
Nothing was really helping until I decided that I had to turn things around myself.
What's up, Doc?
Enter the hare and his hunter.
You got me, Doc.
I had taken a portable DVD player with me, and I remember watching one particular episode of Bugs Bunny. Something about it clicked with me, and the gears started turning. And we always see Elmer Fudd's rifle blow up in his face. It doesn't matter what's going on. Bugs Bunny ties it in a knot, shoves something in a barrel. You always see it go off in his face. And it's a tragedy. But it's hilarious to see. So I decided thinking, you know what, that's the way I need to be. I need to find the humor in my situation.
He decided the girl wasn't worth it, and the car was his one true love. He'd figure out a way to pay for it, and he got his job and his gun back.
I started looking past where I was and started looking at where I wanted to be.
Where he wanted to be was somewhere he could help others. Then one day he found himself at a suicide prevention training.
And I was not impressed with the training we were getting. I'd look around, people would be asleep. People are sitting there playing on their phones, glancing up, going, okay, yeah. Ask them straight out, are you going to kill yourself? The minute those words come out of their mouth, trust me, I know from experience.
He figured as the guy who was once at the wrong end of his own weapon, he could do it better.
Why a spike in 2010 on suicides? Is there anything that's attributed to, Storm?
There's nothing actually attributed to it. One of the big speculations is whether or not it's been our deployment rates and the amount of time we've stayed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
He created a suicide prevention team made up of one person from each shop. The idea is to give prevention a familiar face. Many volunteers have had dark days of their own.
Given some of the experiences I've had since I've been in the Marine Corps, I said I might be an asset.
I jumped on the opportunity to join, to volunteer, to help be my brother's keeper.
The team has regular meetings, and its leader is advising more teams in other units. And they've had a number of successful interventions.
You know, I don't have a medical degree. I don't have any degree of any kind. I just sit down and talk to them.
LaFleur says he's always able to help people who feel trapped find an escape hatch.
They've got ways out. And if they need my help, give me a call. You know, I'll do what I can to help.
We've just shown you suicide is preventable, and lives are being turned around. One way the Army is communicating that message is through the power of media. And this past July, they released an eye-opening video they hope will save many lives. It's called Shoulder to Shoulder.
I realized that the marriage was over.
The video is a candid, straightforward look at the face of suicide.
I didn't care about anything in the world at this time. I didn't care about friends. I didn't care about my family. The only thing I thought was my world was over.
For Army Specialist Joseph Saunders, who at the time was serving in Iraq, it was the breakup of his marriage that had him contemplating death.
My whole universe just came crashing down on me because that's what she was to me.
The story is real. It's told by Specialist Saunders and the friend who saved his life, Specialist Albert Gooding.
I asked my friend Chappell, I was like, hey man, what's going on with Sanders? Chappell told me, like, yeah, his wife asked him for a divorce.
Less than 2 minutes into the video, both men recall the suicide attempt.
I grabbed the rifle off the wall, put my rifle up to my chin, put it on semi, and I pulled the trigger. Godding walks in the door after all this happened. And I look at him and I said, Godding, where is my firing pin? He said, Sanders.
How'd you find out? And he's like,
I tried to kill myself.
I would say to this point it's been very well received.
Colonel Chris Philbrick is director of the Army Suicide Prevention Task Force. He says the Army was looking to produce a product that would resonate with the soldiers.
It's closer to home. It's soldiers, civilians, family members who have walked the walk and talked the talk.
The video also includes interviews with military families.
I laid on the floor of my bedroom while my wife pleaded with me not to take my life.
If you do this, who benefits?
What's it going to do to the children? Why would you leave us this way?
And he said, well, I'll be gone and everything will be okay.
Most importantly, the product is a call to action. It encourages, even pleads, with those who suspect trouble to take action.
We just have to accept that we are human. Everyone has problems. It's not abnormal. You're not crazy if you have these thoughts or these feelings. But you have to reach out to somebody, and the great thing about being in the military is that someone will hear you.
The effort continues. It's not just a new video and we call it a day. This is an ongoing iterative process that we look very hard at to ensure that our messages are crafted appropriately, that the target audience, in this case the Army family, is effectively reached as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
As soon as I started talking, I immediately started to feel better. I wanted to conquer this thing. I didn't want to be sad all the time, so when I got that help, I did everything that they told me to do, and I got better.
Last week, we talked with families of service members who took their own lives. Stephanie Farmer's husband, Josh, died in 2009 after struggling with post-traumatic stress and drug and alcohol problems. He shot himself on Stephanie's birthday, leaving her to raise their 4-year-old son.
I told him that Daddy had to go and be in God's army. And so that's what he tells people now, and he's so proud.
Josh was a member of the Arkansas National Guard, which has been hit hard by the upward trend in suicides. 7 died just last year. That number served as a call to action in Little Rock, Arkansas. Joshua Farmer's death, they believe, could have been prevented if they'd had more information and fewer roadblocks. So they created a treatment team made up of a suicide prevention officer, a chaplain, and a psychological services director. That team was immediately put to the test.
It's the middle of the night, I get a phone call from a particular soldier.
The crisis call came as a tip.
He says, "Sir, I've been at a bar with my buddy. He's not doing too good." And he said, "Sir, can I give you his phone number? Can you give him a call?" "Absolutely, I'll give him a call."
Started drinking that night, and I actually drove to Walmart, bought a Tylenol, or one of the big economy size Tylenol PM bottles.
I then dial the number several times. He doesn't answer. I text him, and the next thing I know, he calls me back.
Don't know how I got his number. I don't remember it all.
And I said, "Specialist Ritter, where are you at?" He said, "I don't want to tell you, sir." He said, "Sir, I've taken a bottle of pills." I asked him, I said, "How many pills did you take?" And he said, "It's enough to finish me."
While this was happening, I kept kind of going in and out of conscience.
Chaplain Miller texted the soldier throughout the night, and while Chaplain Miller was doing that, I was working with the police department with 911 trying to locate him.
We knew that time was running out on us. He was complaining about not being able to feel his legs, not being able to feel his arms.
They were able to find 2 possible addresses.
He was misspelling a lot of words. Sometimes he would send me texts that was just gibberish.
Chaplain Miller and I were a little stressed, thinking that we had run out of time.
Eventually, he said, I'm really getting numb now. I'm going to go ahead and break contact, and he did.
The paramedics showed up. They kicked down the door of one of those locations, and he was there.
I didn't have a pulse. I didn't have anything.
He was not responsive. He was not breathing.
Paramedics actually revived me.
He was unconscious for a matter of days, off and on again. We thought we were going to lose him several times.
I mean, it was definitely a God thing, because the paramedic and the doctor said I shouldn't have been alive at all.
Ritter was alive, but far from in the clear.
Figured it'd be easier, and little did I know it was 10 times harder after I woke up.
He had deployed to Iraq in 2007 and still suffered from post-traumatic stress. He hadn't been able to find a job, and the bills were piling up. His father was afraid he'd eventually try it again.
I felt like he was okay, at least temporarily, but I knew he needed some longer-term help.
It was the death of Josh Farmer that paved the way for that to happen. Another change in Guard policy after Josh's death was a memorandum of agreement with the local VA hospital. Farmer had been turned away from the VA. The agreement didn't allow that to happen to Ritter.
It was one of those cases where Farmer and his death absolutely saved Ritter's life.
We got a 45-day court order that ensured that he would make all his appointments, take his medicine, and if at some point he didn't do that, then a warrant would be issued for his arrest. So we went to some pretty extreme measures for him.
Specialist Ritter now lives next door to his brother and works at a family-owned landscaping company. He talks with Captain Phillips nearly every day.
And I kind of joked around with Captain Phillips for a while. I was like, I obviously can't kill myself, so there's no point in trying again. She always says I have, 9 lives. I'm definitely lucky. Sometimes I still sit and wonder, I'm like, how did that possibly happen? I shouldn't be here at all.
Welcome back to our program. It was a story we first brought you a year ago, and we feel is important enough to revisit again. It's the story of one Army captain's struggle with suicide and what she's doing to help her fellow soldiers.
You don't have to kill yourself. There's a way out.
Captain Emily Stair is recovering after 15 months in Iraq.
Emily, say hi to your people.
This is a war that will never be over for me.
When her duty downrange ended, it was the beginning of a very private battle with suicide. She's not alone. Last year, 115 soldiers took their own lives. That's the highest number of suicides ever recorded in the Army. This year's numbers have almost exceeded last year's, and it's only August.
There is this population of people that don't really have a voice. You know, they're suffering in silence. And so I feel like I can represent them.
Emily went public with her story 2 months ago. It was a risk. She, too, was almost silenced by the stigma.
Initially, I was told not to talk about it.
Army leaders at the highest level say, do talk.
So we've got a captain that's come forth and said that she sought assistance and help. We'll have a master sergeant. We could have a private. We could have a general officer.
Emily went direct to General McGuire with her story.
This is an issue that supersedes rank. These are issues. That's why I can email a general at the Pentagon and not get in trouble. Because this is an issue that's bigger than me being a captain.
Emily is now telling her story to the world. She's online at realwarriors.net, a site dedicated to stories about suicide. More than 100 people watched her story the first day it posted.
A lot of people said thank you for telling your story, thank you for coming out of the closet, so to speak.
She wasn't an actor. She was one of them.
Saving just one life would be enough. In Emily's words, the war has taken enough soldiers. She says she was wounded in action, the kind of injury you can't see. But she hopes her story will open eyes about the new trend that seems to be growing.
There is no doubt the invisible wounds of war are as profound and as deep as many of the physical injuries suffered on the battlefield. The negative perception among troops that seeking care for an emotional wound is a sign of weakness is now changing as leaders work to stop the stigma.
These days, even the tough guys in the movies are seeking a little help.
It's gonna be fine.
Have they found the person that shot him yet?
No.
Mafia boss Tony Soprano did it, and so did gangster Robert De Niro in the movie Analyze That.
Paul, I'm gonna give you some tests to assess your mental condition. Okay?
Both movie characters show us raising your hand and asking for emotional help should not be a sign of weakness. It's a stereotype that has loomed large in our society and in the U.S. military for years.
Most individuals use the term mental health to deal with issues related to the mind. As part of our efforts to try to destigmatize this, to make it, I won't call it softer, but just a different way of approaching it, we use the term behavioral health.
Behavioral health care can include treatment for post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. Also counseling for those adjusting to life before and after deployment, or for some, it may mean help coping with overwhelming personal problems.
The stigma, that is a big thing we are wrestling. Probably out of all the services, Marine Corps, I would say that just by the the macho image that we produce, the stigma it's still out there.
Master Gunnery Sergeant Peter Proaeto says the Marine Corps in particular has a long way to go in erasing the negative image that goes along with getting care. One suggestion he made to overcome the stigma, make it mandatory for service members to get yearly behavioral screenings, just like physicals.
Every year I have to go take a physical health assessment. Well, why not everybody take a behavioral health? And you know what, if I'm sitting in the waiting room alongside 2 junior Marines, then it's no big deal. Everybody goes and everybody knows.
Another barrier to care, anonymity. Fear expressed by service members that seeking help would harm their military career.
We should not, in any way, shape, or form, harass or in some way belittle or demean that individual for taking the step forward and asking for and seeking the help that they quite frankly need.
We should never underestimate the impact of leadership on preventing suicide. Positive leaders, caring, concerned leadership makes a world of difference. And those that look at the whole person and take care of the whole person. And we need to do more of that.
If there are 2 people who exemplify the sort of spirit and hope that can survive following a suicide, It's Major General Mark Graham and his wife Carol. On June 21, 2003, they lost their son Kevin to suicide. 7 months later, his older brother Jeffrey was killed in combat. Grief nearly drove the Grahams away from their Army family. But in the 11th hour, they recognized and embraced their new mission. And they're now in demand more than ever. Appreciation for what they've been through and how they're channeling that grief.
My name's Mark Graham, and I'm an American soldier.
The Grahams have come to be known as the sort of gurus of suicide survival.
We're in a club we never wanted to be in.
The devastating deaths of their 2 sons had taken their toll. Despite tremendous support from the Army, General Graham decided to separate.
My boss wanted me to stay, but I just said, sir, I'm kind of out of gas here. I've lost 2 sons. I don't know if I can keep doing this.
Then one morning, not long before the general's scheduled departure, his wife shared with him her morning devotional.
In suffering, we find ourselves or we destroy ourselves. If you find yourself in the fires of sorrow, you can be nourishment for other people. It just really hit me that, hey, what are you thinking? There's more to do here. Maybe I need to stay. They did stay. The job, Deputy Chief of Staff, U.S. Army Forces Command. Their passion, talking about their sons and about what happened. Whenever we can, we go out and speak and help others know there is hope.
So a lot of people go, oh, how do you keep doing it? How do you keep sharing your story? But we're talking about our boys. And for us, it keeps them alive.
I truly think our boys both died fighting different battles. I think Kevin was fighting a battle, and he was fighting it hard.
When Kevin died, we truly thought we were the worst parents, and we just had so failed our son.
We as parents thought, there's no way our son's got depression. We didn't want to believe it either. We were part of the stigma. So there's really difference. The stigma is not just the individual going through it, but it's everyone around them.
He said, well, I went to this depression screening and they think I should go on medication. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking it's like an antibiotic or something. And Kev's going to take erythromycin. He's going to get better and he'll quit talking about being depressed. We blamed ourselves completely. But then Jeffrey died, like warning his platoon. He died a hero's death. There's all this honor and glory with Jeffrey's death, but we're like looking at each other going, hey, wait a minute, we're still the same people. Then maybe it wasn't totally, completely our fault.
When was the first time you really laughed?
I know that I felt guilty if I laughed.
It was a long time before I laughed. It was over a year probably before I really laughed.
Yeah, that's...
At least, before I laughed. And then even then when I laughed, I caught myself real quick, thinking, who am I to be happy again? Fun is new now than it was before. It'll never be fun the same way it was. Happy will never be the same way it was before we lost the boys. And it's the same for our daughter. She's happy now, but it's a different happy than it ever was before. This is the first time I've spoken when I'm able to say this, but I am happy to announce that Joe Quinn and Melanie Graham are now engaged to be married. And they'll be thank you very much. We're happy campers.
And then when you connect with other people that are hurting, that's kind of like it takes some of it. You hopefully take some of their pain and they take some of yours. And that's why I think we're supposed to share joy and sorrow.
The Grahams continue to travel the country, encouraging service members to seek help without fear of embarrassment or retribution. Next week on the program, we sit down for an interview with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, and his wife, Deborah, who are helping lead the awareness campaign surrounding suicide prevention.
It's a very difficult, vexing, complex problem, and one that leadership has to spend an awful lot of time on to try to figure out. It's one that in the country is not well understood. It's an area that can't get enough focus right now. And when we're losing as many lives as we are, it is a crisis we have to continue to address. Too often, a suicide occurs and we just support the family and then we want to move on. And I just don't think we can do that anymore.
If someone chooses to end their own life, they have lost all hope. So I think calling this Restoring Hope is a very powerful message that you're sending. And it is a message that no matter how hard, how long, no matter what it takes, however many people need to get involved in this, this is something that the military is going to pursue and try to eliminate totally.
More from Mr. and Mrs. Mullen next week on Restoring Hope. Reaching out. We must remember that suicide is never the answer, but getting help is. If you or someone you know is in need of help, please reach out. We want to thank all those who contributed to our program, including those service members who opened up and shared their stories. For complete coverage of our Restoring Hope series, go to defense.gov/restoringhope.